Imagine a world where men stepped up and answered God's call to reach their full potential. Imagine a world where men put their faith and trust in God unwaveringly and without qualification. Imagine a world where men lived out God's purpose for them in everything they do. It's Not My Credit to Take explores the awe and wonder of how God shows up in the lives of strong, principled Christian men from all walks of life. Get ready to laugh, to cry, and to be transformed. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Slover, faithful husband, loving father, loyal friend, and unapologetically Christian. Welcome to the It's Not My Credit to Take podcast.
Sam Bradford, how are you, sir?
Oh, wonderful.
The beard's coming in nice. Look at that.
My mustache has gotten so long that I have to pull it to the sides. It's not for fashion, it's for practicality.
It's looking good. I can't help but I've got the snow cone going on at the end, the tip of my goatee right here. I don't know how that happened. But my guest today is Sam Bradford. Sam began his mentoring journey as a youth pastor, serving his community for more than 12 years. A change of heart occurred 7 years ago for him after listening to a podcast about Dutch Bros Coffee, where the founder, Travis Beersma, I probably butchered that one, spoke about the company's culture of love. It was then that Sam joined Dutch Bros Arizona with the ambition and intent to help people grow. 7 months after being hired as a broista, he was appointed director of people management, where he created and offered curriculum to teach team members classes on goal setting, self-leadership, and personal finance. Sam has had the privilege of speaking at events such as TEDx, the Arizona Diamondbacks Leadership Initiative, Grand Canyon University's Next Level Leadership Conference, the RTA Fleet Success Summit, and most recently to the Elite Entrepreneurs Momentum Live event. Sam has a true passion for speaking, coaching, and leading people to improve their lives as well as the lives of those around them. He's been married to his wife, Chelsea, for 14 years, and they have a 20-month-old daughter. Sam Bradford, thank you so much for taking time to be on the It's Not My Credit to Take podcast.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and I'm really excited just to be here with you, Ed.
Yeah, I was reflecting on this conversation, and one of the first things that popped in my head was, how long have we known one another? Because it seems like we've known each other a lot longer than it's actually been. It's only been about a year, where we met at Grand Canyon University's Next Level Leadership Conference. I remember you sitting in the room, and then we bumped into one another later on before you gave a talk. Does it feel like that for you? Like we've just kind of kindred spirits? We've known one another for a really long time?
Absolutely. I just remember sitting in your session and just being so moved by your vulnerability and your story. And I still to this day use the tomato analogy of just resilience. And it's just been just incredible.
Yeah, for the listeners, I spoke about resilience. And one of the things that we like to think is that we're like tennis balls, where whenever we face struggle and adversity, we simply bounce back, and we bounce back to the way we normally were or what was normal. And the reality is we're much more like tomatoes, where if you imagine being out in your front yard holding a tomato and giving that a good hard squeeze, it makes an absolute mess. But the seeds on the ground give the opportunity for new growth or renewed growth and development, and we're never fully the same. So I'm not entirely sure who I stole that from, but I guarantee I stole it from somebody. I mean, there's rarely a good idea too good not to steal.
Yeah.
So subsequent to that, I've heard you speak publicly, and you're not shy about sharing your story of childhood trauma. Can you share your story here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I'm like trying to figure out where to start. I guess we'll start as early on as I can. Is that my parents split up when I was really young, and my mom dated for a while. And like my first traumatizing experience that I remember was I think I was 4. I was at a park. My mom was dating this guy that we barely knew, and it was time to leave. And just like any kid, I was having a good time and didn't want to go. And the more that she would say, "Hey, we need to go," I would just keep running and saying no. Well, this gentleman decided to grab me. He grabbed me, he flipped me upside down and held me by my ankles and started just to swat me. And I was just completely terrified because he was a stranger. I didn't know I didn't really know him. And I just immediately remember screaming and being like asking for my mom. And in that moment, he just would not let go. He just basically bear hugged me and wouldn't let me move. Um, and it was terrifying. I remember being so frustrated at him that even at 4 years old, when we went back to his house in the vehicle, and my mom and my siblings went inside, I refused to go inside. I was like, "This is not a person I want to be around." Um, so that was just kind of my introduction to trauma. And then my mom and my stepdad, I would probably describe their relationship like fire and gasoline. Like they were two sweet people and kind people, but they just had such hard relationship things in their life and such hard past that when they came together, it was just explosive. And we were young, and my siblings and I were just kids, and we were the casualties of most of their fighting. And I would sum up the majority of my childhood in this cycle that took place. That would be, I did something to break a rule, and then my stepdad would say, "Okay, I'm going to swat you." And like his swats were intense, and he had made his own paddle and kind of created this disciplinary system of his, and it was tough. And so what would happen is my mom would start to get emotional, and then she would try to jump in and rescue me. And in doing so, it would start an argument between them. And the argument would go on and on and on, and it would be very intense, and it would last for a long time. And there was many moments as a kid where I would try to jump in and stop it. I don't like fighting. I don't like it when people can't get along. And so I would try to stop it, and I couldn't. And it would sometimes make it worse. I would eventually get told to go to my room and wait. And I would wait, and I would hear them screaming, and I would hear things breaking, and I would just know that when all that got done, that it was my turn, and that he was going to come upstairs, and that he was going to just take it out on me. He was going to discipline me in a really harsh manner. Um, and that would happen probably twice a week throughout my childhood. And it was intense. It was very hard to deal with. It was hard to live around. There were moments where I wanted to give up, moments where I wanted to quit. Um, that it intensified, right? As I got older, it intensified because I started going to school, and I had a learning disability. Go figure. And I honestly, like, having taken Psych 101, I learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it just made so much sense. It kind of clicked that I was like, "Oh, yeah, like all this stuff at home was so intense and scary that it made me feel like I just didn't want to learn at all, and learning for me wasn't even important. Surviving was important." And so that, coupled with the learning disability, school was just not my place. It was not a place where I went to learn and grow. It was a place where I went to have fun and goof off. And that made it worse, because when I would bring home those report cards, or worse, when I would destroy the report card and pretend like the dog ate it, or figure out a way that I couldn't show my parents, that it would always come back to, like, "You're lying, and now you're going to get swats." And there was always a discipline attached to it. Um, there was a moment in junior high where I had a teacher. He was a PE teacher, and we were doing this thing that I was just totally not on board with. And so I just told him, I said, "I'm not going to participate." And he was like, "Well, if you don't participate, then you're going to get a bad grade and whatever." I said, "That's fine. I'm not going to participate." Well, what had happened is that a kid in the class had said a cuss word, and he looked at me, just immediately looked at me and said, "Don't say that again, or I'm gonna write you up." And I was like, "Hey, I didn't say anything." And for whatever reason, it happened again, and he wrote me up. And I, being the person I was like, I'm not signing that. Like, I didn't cuss, and I'm not signing that. It just escalated. It escalated to the point where I ended up in the principal's office. My parents ended up in the principal's office, and this man knew my parents, and it just was gnarly. Like, I just remember him telling my parents what happened, me disagreeing, my stepdad looking at me and being like, "You're a liar. Like, you're lying. This man has integrity. Like, why would he lie?" Um, and then my mom just trying to defend me, and them starting to argue. And it was such a moment, Ed, where it got so intense that I knew that, like, when they left that office, that they were going to go home and it was going to go down. And I was like sick to my stomach because I was so afraid of it escalating to the point where my mom would get hurt. Thank God it never did. But I also was in this place of like, I knew that it was going to be super crazy when they went home. But then I knew that when I got out of school and when I went home, it was going to be even more crazy. And it was just those moments where I just wanted to give up. I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to, this is so hard. And I wish I could say that it like ended when I got old enough to not get SWATs, but it continued. It continued to the point of grounding, of just really intense grounding. And in a way, it felt like there was times where my stepdad would set up scenarios where he knew I would choose the wrong thing, and then let me fall into that, and then discipline me harshly. And so it was just a really, really, really difficult childhood. And I mean, I started doing drugs and drinking alcohol in sixth grade. It's crazy now when I see sixth graders to like see them and go, whoa, why in the world was I that age and just starting to like experiment with alcohol and drugs, knowing that like when I hit my freshman year of high school, I was experimenting with meth and drinking bottles of Robitussin because I was just so overwhelmed and frustrated with my life that I was like, I need an escape. I need to get away from all of this. And so that was it was a lot. It was very, very overwhelming.
It's amazing that you have arrived at a place in your life, or the place in your life based on the past. I mean, you're the director of people development at Dutch Bros. You, by any measurable standard, that's success. And then you've got a growing coaching and speaking career. So somewhere along the way, you found Jesus. Or can you walk us through, how or what brought you to Christ?
Yeah. This one's a little bit tough. And I mean, like, part of that childhood that I didn't touch on is that my stepdad and my mom were heavily involved in church. And so like that's part of my story as well, is like watching my stepdad and my mom be worship leaders for the good majority of that time that was going on. And then when I was in high school, my stepdad became a pastor of a church. And I still had a lot of really heavy struggles with him. So I would say that I'm still in this place of experiencing Jesus and trying to learn who Jesus truly is. And like I'm unlearning a lot of things that I learned as a child that were like, very religious on one hand, and then very like hurtful and hard on the other hand. And it's like, I'm still, I want to talk about this because it was super helpful for me in my journey. There's a book by this lady named KJ Ramsey called The Lord Is My Courage. And it has just been really helpful and really just encouraging to experience, like have somebody else walk through church hurt and church pain and kind of like some breaking out some misconceptions of things. So I don't know if I know Jesus. I think I'm in the process of knowing Jesus. And like, I don't, it's just one of those things where I'm like, I'm leaning into it, but there's a lot of hurt there, and there's a lot of like misconceptions and things that have been really challenging for me.
Why are you motivated to know Jesus, especially considering that your mom and stepdad were actively involved in the church? He became a pastor, and yet you had the home life you had. I don't know, Sam, how I would react to that. My guess is that I would move as far away from anything church or related, or spirituality or religion. What is it? What is it in you that is sort of still drawing you towards Jesus?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing is that like I've always just had a really tender heart, and I always just really like love people. And that, like, when we drill down to Jesus at his core, he loved people. I was talking to my mom about it the other day. We kind of sat through a service where the person was being a church service where the person was being loud and angry and kind of beating their fists and yelling, and we were talking about it, and I just said, I don't ever like see Jesus that way. The only times that I do see him that way are when he's upset at the religious people. Like, I don't see him responding to sinners like that. And I think that that's been something that's kind of held me close, and continues to, like, the moments where I'm confused or frustrated. I'm just trying to realize that, like, what I don't like about religious stuff isn't the Jesus in it. It's this stuff that people have put on it. That, like, if I always come back to looking at him and the way he treated people, the way he showed up for people, that's how I want to live, and that's how I want to exist. And the things that people have done in his name have been a massive turnoff, and massive, and have been so hurtful. And so I think the reality is just like, when I see that, the way that Jesus lived, it was attractive, and it's still attractive. And so I just have to, like, I have to see and separate those things. And when I start to feel religion getting a little sideways, I have to separate those things for myself to be able to stay close.
Yeah. How is your relationship with your stepdad today?
Yeah. Man, so last year we sat down and had a really, really hard conversation, because in my family, the way that it worked was like we were going to church every time the doors were open, and yet I was not allowed to listen to country music because it was like non-Christian, and anything that was non-Christian could lead you away from Jesus. And so there was this massive, like, dichotomy. And then there was also, on top of that, there was just this, like, yeah, I want to come back to the question. How's my relationship with my stepdad? So during all the stuff that we were going through, we never talked about it. We never had moments where afterwards we would sit down and say, hey, that was terrible. What happened? I'm so sorry. There was literally just a shoving under the rug. And so last year, I sat down with my stepdad, accompanied by my sister and my brother, and really just said, we need to talk about the abuse. We need to talk about all the things that happened, because I'm working through my faith. I'm working through where I land with the Lord, and I need you to know where I'm at and why I am where I am. But I also, oh man, I'm going to reference a movie, and I have to preface it by saying the movie's rough. But the impact it made on me was astounding. It's a movie by a director, Zach Braff, and it's called Wish I Was Here. And it is a movie about a son who has an overbearing father who's critical of him, who's constantly judging him, and he's in his midlife. He's married, he has kids, and he's kind of failing at his life. And his dad is just constantly critical of him. And there's a moment midway through the film where his dad gets diagnosed with cancer, and is terminally ill. And in the film, you kind of realize that his younger brother has completely written his dad off and doesn't want anything to do with him. I'm going to give a spoiler alert, but what happened is when my wife said, "Hey, let's go watch this movie," we went to the theater, and I had no idea I didn't know what the film was about. And we were in the theater and we're watching it, and like it gets to the point, the movie escalates. The mom has passed away. She's been out of the picture for a while, and there's just this moment where the dad they know he's going to pass, and the older brother calls the younger brother and he says, "Hey, like, you need to come, like, dad's going to die and you need to see him." And like at the end of the movie, like the older brother is at his dad's bedside. He brought his dad's favorite ice cream bars, and like the younger brother walks into the room, and the dad just looks at his boys and he's like, "I'm so proud of you boys." And like they hold hands, and I was crying like this in the movie. And then when it ended, I like walked out and I was like pretty much sobbing. And then I got into the truck and it just like washed over me. And I just could not stop crying. And there was a heavy moment where my wife was with me. We're in this little teeny truck where I just started punching the steering wheel and just like screaming and just like letting everything come out. And she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Why did this have to happen to me? Like, why did my childhood have to hurt so bad? Like, if my dad never would have left, then this never would have happened." And it was so heavy. But what I walked away with from that film was like, I have to know that, like, if this relationship is mendable, that I tried. Like, I don't want to get to the end of my life and have this like moment of like, should I have tried to like mend it? And so at that point, I just realized like I need to try to connect with him. And so I did. We had a really beautiful moment. I told him about everything that happened. I reminded him of everything that happened, and I sobbed. And he cried. He told me about things that I didn't realize happened to him as a kid. There was a lot of healing on that day. And I also know that there's a lot of healing that still needs to take place. And it's hard because of his personality and my personality. I would say we're a lot closer, but I still think it's really tough. And I don't want to give like false hope of like, oh, it's perfect. But I think we're two people that can work on ourselves, and we're working on our relationship.
Yeah. Ties to the adage, hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
Which is one of the things that I am and have been impressed by you, because how you've lived your life, living by your values, you haven't perpetuated the cycle with your wife and daughter. And it's really impressive. It certainly doesn't justify your stepdad's behavior. It helps explain his behavior. But you've
Right.
gone the other way, and I'm sure throughout your marriage you've gone through ups and downs. I mean, the roller coaster in marriage, that's when we're doing marriage well. We just we hope it doesn't flatline. And so switching gears a little bit, because you have such a love for people, and I'm positive you apply, that's your wife and your daughter and certainly the people that you work with. Do you have a willingness to discuss your faith in the workplace? And if so, what would that sound like?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes back to just the way that I'm processing things. Like, I think, like, for me, my faith in the workplace looks like loving people well, and like and just really trying to exemplify that Jesus that like accepted people, loved people, was welcoming. Um, I I I fear, being overly critical and all those things that were going on with me, and so it's neat, like working in the environment that I work in, there are a lot of believers. And I think that that's something that I really just try to exemplify the love of Christ and how that shows up for people. And also this level of honesty, right? Like I am working through things, like I said before. And I think that like, I think that's just real. And I think that like young people need to know that it's not all pretty and buttoned up all the time, that there's moments where I'm still unsure and I'm still figuring it out and I'm still wrestling. And I don't know for sure all the things that I was so sure of at one point. But yeah, that for me is just a place where I just want to like, I know it was said before, but I don't remember who said it, but they said, you know, preach the gospel and when necessary, use words. I think that there's so many times that the church has done a poor job of preaching the gospel with words, but then not living it well, and just being awful, you know. And I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of I want people to ask me why I want to live the way I want to live and be able to share that with them, as opposed to cramming it down their throat and then having moral failures and treating people poorly. So I always want to try to live it out.
One of the things I talk to my students about is that in secular businesses, we very much have to be bartenders. When bartenders are trained to not talk about sex, politics, or religion, especially when someone's getting lit up on the other side of the counter.
Yeah.
That said, one of the things I offer to them is, if you get the question, answer the question. If someone asks you about your faith, answer honestly, because in response to the question, that by definition, you're not cramming it down anyone else's throat. You're not, thumping on the Bible. Is that the approach that you take in the workplace?
Yes. I think that's a brilliant way to put it, Ed. That I've never thought of it that way, but it makes so much sense. Of like, live in such a way that people are curious, and when they're curious, it gives you an open door to answer that question. That to me is so much more inviting. Yeah, it just, I mean, that was the problem. One of the problems in my childhood was that I was constantly getting answers to questions I didn't ask, and that's such a turnoff, you know. And so I think that mindset is really incredible, of like, live in such a way that people ask questions, and when they do, be open and share with them.
Yeah. Last fall, I had about a half a dozen young men come up to me separately after class, mustering the courage to come up and ask, what does it mean to be a man? And the first one, I wasn't entirely sure how to respond, because I was so taken aback by the question, because we grew up in a time, and I'm a little bit older than you, grew up in a time where it was seemingly obvious what it meant to be a man, protector, provider. And I get that it's shifted. There's always shifts in culture, but there today appears to be a significant need for men, definitely young men, to build stronger character. And knowing that this podcast is really all about, talking to strong, principled Christian men to provide hopefully some type of inspiration that will get these men to show up differently in the world and step up and answer God's call of the potential. I'm curious to learn from you, as a strong, principled Christian man, how do we go about helping them better?
Yeah. I keep coming back to just like living by example. That's like the best way that I can do it, is just to show them, like, look, you can be a strong husband, a strong father, and you don't have to fall into these traps that exist, and you don't have to you don't have to treat people the way that you've been treated. You don't have to go through these things. I think that they just need examples. And that was the hard thing for me as a kid, is my examples were so broken. It was like, you can't listen to country music, but I'm going to scream and yell at you and take like violence against you. those things are super confusing. And so I think the best way that we can help them is just to show them congruency in our own life of like, look, and when we do make mistakes, because I make mistakes, like you were referring to earlier, as a husband, I haven't been perfect, but I'm the first one to admit when I make a mistake. I'm like, hey, I'm wrong, I'm sorry, and I will work on being better. Those things for me, I think, go so much further than standing back and saying, you guys need to be more like this and less like that. I constantly, I mean, it's a cycle that takes place in generations where, and I'm a part of the cycle too, because now the new music out, I hate it, right? Like the new stuff that's coming out, I'm like, oh, this music sucks. And I can't believe these kids listen to that. Every generation is going to get used to their way of doing things, and then they're going to constantly look at the next generation and think they're a bunch of screw ups. But I think, and that's something that I've seen at Dutch Bros that's been so incredible, is that like people will rise to the level that you believe in them, and that you like. I've watched young people just be incredible, and I always talk about it whenever I speak. I'm like, we could go to all these different fast food restaurants and talk to them about how hard it is to find good young people. And the reality is they would tell us that they don't exist. And so I think as a person that's like working with young people, I think believing in them, being a good guide and showing them what it looks like, and like being there to like you said, like when people approach you, just to walk them through it.
I want to get your thoughts on this idea. It's one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, what do you attribute the listlessness and aimlessness of young men in this country to? And I think you answered it, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Sure.
Asking more from them rather than less. For whatever reason, I don't believe we ask enough of men in general, but young men specifically. Did I capture your sentiment right on that? So set the bar higher, level up the expectation, ask more from young men rather than less. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, and then the way that the way we think about them and the way that we speak about them. When we speak about them like, oh, they're lazy and they don't want to do this and they don't want to do that. I think we're just not giving them a fair shake. I think it's really just like, I don't know. It comes through relationship, and it comes through, I mean, what I'm learning more and more of is just like, I need to listen instead of like telling them all the things. I need to just ask them really phenomenal questions of like, hey, what things are you dealing with? What things are you facing? How can I support you in this journey? It just seems to be that the older generation always wants to tell the younger generation how it's supposed to be. And I just want to be more of one that's listening and open and saying, hey, I have advice to offer, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it. But what I've seen at Dutch, and that's exactly what you said, is that like when we believe in them and when we set the bar high, they will meet that standard. And what I see at every other place that's around is that when they don't believe in them, when they set the bar low and they don't give them any responsibility or credit or anything, then they're going to like meet those, they're going to rise to that standard as well. And so I think we need to connect more with them.
Yeah. You referenced your marriage a few minutes ago. In what ways has your wife, Chelsea, made you a better man?
Man, she has endured a lot of my growth. She's loved me unconditionally through hardships. I mean, I was able through some therapy, through a lot of therapy, to get to this place where I realized that I had a lot of hurt and a lot of pain in my childhood, like obviously. But like it was never appropriate to take that pain out or that frustration out where it belonged. And so I kind of just always stuffed it. And then in our marriage, there was pain and anger that would show up in ways that I was never like stoked on. And I just remember telling her one time, like, you never deserved any of this. this frustration, this pain. I just didn't know what to do with it. And so she has loved me and endured and just really like been patient with me. She's just been phenomenal, a huge support. And even when I decided to make that massive transition from a youth pastor to working at Dutch Bros, I took on some huge risks of quitting my full-time job and getting hired part-time as a broista. And I think most people would have been like, "You're crazy," but she was like, let's do it. So just being that person that's believed in me has been massive.
That's wonderful to hear. My wife is unwaveringly supportive of me stepping away from Grand Canyon and, pursuing my businesses. And I don't know about you, Sam, but I don't think I could make that leap if I didn't have her unwavering support.
Yeah.
In what ways has becoming a father changed you in your walk with Christ? I mean, Presley is 20 months old, so not quite 2. How's that changed your life?
Man, it's just incredible. It's something, if we would have met when I was in junior high, I would have told you that I can't wait to be a dad. It's hilarious. I remember being in junior high and telling people that, and they were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, slow down!" Like, and I'm like, "No, I'm not trying to be a dad right now." But I just,
I mean, they took "can't wait" literally.
yeah. They were like, "Don't have a baby right now," and I'm like, "I get it. But I just always wanted an opportunity to love somebody, and I just, yeah, I think it's helping me better understand the way that God feels about me. Um, I think that there's these guys, Henry Cloud and John Townsend, these like Christian psychologist guys, and they said you can have love or you can have control, but you can't have both. That those things are polar opposites, and so you either love someone or you control them. And my heart from the beginning, as soon as Presley was born, is I can't wait to meet you and I can't wait to learn about you. Um, I don't want to tell you who you are. I don't want to tell you all the things that you like and the things that you're going to be when you grow up. I just want to learn more about you. I want to know you, and I want to be invested in your life, and I want to connect. And so in so many ways, like there's just a lot of unlearning taking place of my experiences as a young man, and the way that parental figure showed up, and it was so controlling and domineering, and in a way I was like associating that with God, of like, oh, this is how God is. He's controlling, he's domineering. He's just going to force me to do what he wants me to do. And I feel like I'm learning more about God's love, and just how unconditional it can be, and how God is so willing and open to like just to get to know, like, I mean, he knows me intimately. But yeah, it's been such a beautiful journey with Presley, and just like, I don't know. I mean, I know I'm going to make mistakes as a parent. Sometimes I feel like I swing to the other side of the pendulum where I'm like too lackadaisical. I'm like, oh, it's fine. We'll figure that out later. But I just, I want her to never question a day in her mind that her dad loves her and that her dad is just there for her. That to me is like the capstone of our relationship, is that she just knows that my dad is crazy about me.
Well, for what it's worth, being the father of 2 daughters, very different age ranges from Presley. Jocelyn's 15 and Evelyn turns 13 tomorrow. I can tell you that all of the investment that you're making in her life now and will continue making, even when they disappear on you and don't want anything to do with you when they're teenagers, they find their way back. And
Yeah.
so, for example, just a quick story. I traveled last weekend. I was gone for 4 days. Carolyn and Jocelyn went to Las Vegas to see my other daughter play in a weekend volleyball tournament. There was some there were some days where ended up getting home and they were still gone. And I didn't see Jocelyn for a solid 5 days. And
Wow.
she ended up coming downstairs and finding me. And for anyone listening who doesn't have a child, particularly a teenage child, it's really hard to relate how impactful that is, where your kid seeks you out because your kid missed you.
Yep.
And the moment wasn't lost on me. If she's willing to give me a hug, I'll take it every time, at this point. So.
Yep. Yeah. I know those days are coming. Yeah, I know that those days are coming when she's going to be a teenager and she's going to be like, I don't want anything to do with you. And then again, it's a story of God, right? Of us kind of thinking we got too big and we're going to go figure it out. And God is big enough for my doubt. God is big enough for my fear. He's big enough for my anger when I'm frustrated. And that's just my hope for me, is that I can be big enough for all those things for her, that she can be angry at me and I'm like, it's okay, I still love you. And she could be just doubtful of whatever it is of my care or concern. And I can still say, I'm not mad at you. I still love you. There's really nothing you could do that would take my love away from you. And I think the security of that is incredible.
Yeah, no doubt about it. As we get close to wrapping up here, Sam, you've had an amazing journey, personally and professionally. And professionally, you are now having the opportunity to expand your reach into public speaking. Some awesome coaching opportunities seem to be on the horizon for you. What are some lessons that you've learned through these recent experiences that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah. Steve Jobs said that when you are at the beginning of your life and you're looking forward, it just looks like chaos and it's crazy. But that when you get a little ways into your journey, that you can look back and see all the dots connect. And I don't know, I don't know if he knew the Lord or not, but I think for me, I look back and I can see all those dots connect, and I know that there was a hand in that, and it kind of gives me peace that I don't have to figure it all out, and that I'm along for this journey, and also just the ability to look at my past and see all the hardships and say that stuff wasn't wasted, that all of that created this person that wants so desperately to help people and that wants so desperately to connect with people. And so I think it's redeeming for all that pain to be hey, it wasn't wasted. Those hardships weren't wasted. And then I guess the last thing is just to say yes. I say yes to speaking engagements all the time. Am I scared? 100%. Am I worried that I'm not good enough? Yes. There's always this self-doubt and fear that exists, but the only way for me to continue to grow is just to say yes and just to step into it.
That's awesome. I've had no doubt, especially after having seen you speak, I have no doubt that if you wanted to get on the public speaking circuit and make a go of it full time, there would be no shortage of opportunities. Very impressive. And thank you so much for the wisdom and insights you've provided today. I've been asking this of my guests. I kind of put my guests on the spot a little bit to see if we want to end the conversation with you saying a prayer. Would you be open to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. Lord, I just thank you so much for Ed. I thank you so much that he's one of those dots that you connected my life to. And I just thank you for the work that he's doing. I pray that he would just have a massive impact on men and young people. And just ask that you would use our lives, God. to show people your love, to show people your care and concern and compassion for people. And I pray that when people walk away from a conversation or from a moment of meeting us, that they would feel your heart in us, and that we could be vessels for you. And just thank you so much for this time. I pray for anyone listening who's gone through trauma. Pray for anybody that's gone through hardship, that they would just know that it's not wasted, that you never meant for us to just suffer tremendously like that you are with us. And I just pray that you would just bless them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sam. We're going to have to schedule a time to get some coffee soon.
Yeah.
I need to see that beard up close and personal.
Amen.
All right. Sounds good. Be well, my friend. God bless.
Thank you.
You can contact the show at itsnotmycredittotake.com. We'd love to hear from you. God bless.